Stylistic features are the clothes that are available for you to use. Stylistic choices are the clothes that you actually use, and style is a way to describe the clothes you use. What am I talking about? Let's have a look-see.
Everything you need to easily pass English ATAR. English ATAR made simple. Powered by Saints Coaching.
Welcome back. This lesson is all about stylistic features, stylistic choices, and style. We're looking at all three of these concepts together in the same lesson because, as we'll see shortly, they're easier to understand when compared to one another. Also, don't forget that every lesson after the one on language features, including this one, requires a pretty decent understanding of language features. So make sure you've started revising those digital or analog palm cards before continuing with this lesson. Here are all the times the concepts that we're looking at in this lesson have popped up in past WACE exam questions between 2016 and 2022. If you're like me, you'll probably look at the occurrences of these concepts over the past WACE exam questions and try and find some sort of pattern for whether they come up every second year, every third year, or every year. I was not able to identify any such pattern, but it is clear that it didn't come up in the 2022 exam. So chances are it's going to pop up in yours this year. And here are the relevant syllabus points. We've got two. Firstly, analyzing language, structural, and stylistic choices. That comes from Unit 3, Syllabus Point 1. And then we've got using appropriate language and stylistic features to sustain a personal voice and perspective. That comes from Unit 4, Syllabus Point 10. Lesson objectives. Firstly, we are going to define the key terms. Then we will define style, define stylistic features, define stylistic choices. After that, we'll explain the difference between stylistic features, stylistic choices, and style. Then we will illustrate how the syllabus points manifest in exam questions. Hopefully that's ringing some bells from the previous lesson on structure. I did mention in that lesson that we're going to be going through this sort of exercise a few times throughout this module, and here is just another example of that. After that, we'll analyze a past WACE exam question, and then we'll outline a simple summary. Nice and easy. The key terms. Let's figure out what each concept means. Starting with style. What is style? Page 34 of the 2021 Good Answers book states that the style of a text is determined by the choice of particular stylistic features. The Oxford Dictionary of English just defines style as a way of using language. The definition we're going to go with is a way of describing how a text creator uses language. And whenever we're describing something in English, it's important to have some good adjectives, some good describing words. What I'm trying to say here is that whenever you're answering an analytical question, so a question from the comprehending section or the responding section on style, use an adjective or adjectives to succinctly describe that style. There is a comprehensive list of adjectives that you can use to describe style in the PDF study notes. Note that all of those words in that list, they can also be used to describe voice, but we'll get into that in a few lessons' time. That's style. What about stylistic features? Our definition is the ways in which aspects of text are arranged and then how they affect meaning. This definition is the first sentence of the definition of stylistic features that's used in the glossary of the syllabus document. Let's see what the rest of that definition says. What have we got? The ways in which aspects of text are arranged and how they affect meaning. Examples of stylistic features are lexical choice, syntax, narrative point of view, voice structure, language patterns, and language features, both written and visual. Style can distinguish the work of individuals, for example, Winton Stories, Wright's poems, and Luhrmann's films, as well as the works of a particular period. Once again, nice and wordy. The English ATAR made simple definition of stylistic features has two main elements, and they are emboldened on the screen here: aspects of text and affect meaning. As we just saw in the glossary definition, aspects of text essentially refers to narrative point of view, voice, structure, language patterns, and language features, which include diction and syntax. I've grouped diction and syntax under language features because diction and syntax are instances of language features, so it's just a bit clearer to understand it this way. These are the aspects of text that make up stylistic features. Thankfully, we've already covered the last three. We did this one a few lessons ago, this one 2 lessons ago, and structure the previous lesson. The other two aspects of text, voice and narrative point of view, These have their own separate lessons later in this module, so you won't be an expert on stylistic features until you've watched and completed the activities for those lessons. The second part of the definition, how they affect meaning, just refers to the effects of these aspects of texts. For instance, the use of sophisticated diction, legal jargon, concise syntax, and headings would affect meaning by making a text sound formal and matter-of-fact. Lastly, what about stylistic choices? The glossary definition of stylistic choices is just the selection of stylistic features to achieve a particular effect. We're going to define stylistic choices as simply the selection of stylistic features. I created this presentation and the PDF study notes, and even I am confused by the similarities and differences between all these terms, but we're going to use a really cool framework to clearly understand the differences. This is our definition of stylistic choices. We've just defined stylistic features, and we know that stylistic features appears in the definition of stylistic choices. What can we make of this? In the previous definition, we saw that stylistic features refers to aspects of text, and the aspects of text are narrative point of view, voice, structure, language patterns, and language features. So what this is telling us, and as we're about to see, is that stylistic features are the features that are available to use, whereas stylistic choices are the features that are actually used. The difference between stylistic features, stylistic choices, and style. I'd like us to consider these three terms and their relationship to one another by likening them to the concept of style in the fashion sense, whereby stylistic features refers to the types of language/clothes that are available for you to use. For example, if you were to adopt a casual clothing style, you might wear Birks and socks, slides, thongs, Ugg boots, track pants, sportswear, hoodies, beanies, t-shirts, shorts, etc. If you were to adopt a formal clothing style, you might wear suits, shirts, dresses, dress shoes, heels, boots, analog watches, coats, pants, ties, cufflinks, necklaces, bracelets, rings, etc. And if you were to adopt a designer clothing style, you might wear Gucci, Louis, Balenciaga, Prada, Yves Saint Laurent, Givenchy, Tom Ford, Blueberry, Tiffany, Comme des Garçons. That's to say, stylistic features are the types of clothes that are available to use. Then, stylistic choices are the language or clothes that you actually choose to use. For example, Melanie's casual clothing style is evidenced through her socks and Birks, track pants and hoodie. Harvey's clothing style is evidenced through his dress shoes, his tailor-fit suit, and nice and elegant tie. And then another example, Eric's designer clothing style is evidenced through his Louis backpack, his Comme des Garçons wallet, and Gucci sneakers. The clothes that you actually choose to use lead to your style, and style refers to a way to describe the language or clothes that you use. For instance, it could be said that old mate Harvey has a formal style, as evidenced by his suit. As we established a bit earlier, you can use the list of adjectives that are in the PDF study notes to describe someone's style. Hopefully, that makes a difference between stylistic features, stylistic choices, and style a bit clearer. Now I'd like to do something similar to what we did in the previous lesson on structure, and that is to see how the syllabus points manifest in exam questions. The two relevant syllabus points, as we saw at the beginning of the lesson, are analysing language, structural, and stylistic choices, Unit 3, and then using appropriate language and stylistic features to sustain a personal voice and perspective, Unit 4. Relevant category of exam questions. For the syllabus point from Unit 3, the relevant category of exam questions is analytical questions, and we know that those are questions from the comprehending section and the responding section. The relevant category for the syllabus point from Unit 4 is creative questions, and we know by this stage that these questions come from the composing section of the exam. These are the past WACE exam questions over in this box that are relevant to this syllabus point. As we can see, each one of these questions have popped up in the comprehending section, such as this one here, or the responding section, such as the other three. And then this one past WACE exam question relates to creative questions and this syllabus point. In the context of the analytical questions, the one over in this cell, those questions require you to dissect the style of a text creator by analysing the stylistic choices that the text creator has made. The creative questions, they require you to create your own style by using stylistic features. The stylistic features you end up using, they equal your stylistic choices. Returning to the analytical side, for example, if you're dissecting the methodical style of David Fincher, a great director, you might analyze the stylistic choices such as tracking shots, plot twists, and emotionally visceral film scores. Those stylistic choices that Fincher has made equal stylistic features. Over on the creative side, if you're composing a persuasive text, rather than analyze stylistic choices, you might create an argumentative style by using stylistic features such as rhetorical questions, tricolons, and repetition. Those three stylistic features, rhetorical questions, tricolons, and repetition, they would equal your stylistic choices. In this last main section of the lesson, we're going to see how the content we've just learned is relevant when it comes to answering exam questions. Here is the exam question that we're going to use as an example. With reference to at least one text, discuss the stylistic choices made by a creator in constructing a text within a particular genre. This one comes from a 2019 WACE exam, specifically Section 2, Question 6. If we saw a question like this in an exam, how would we go about answering it? What we're going to do is take a look at an excerpt of a body paragraph that I wrote in response to this question. Before we go on, I just want to remind you that modules 3, 4, and 5 focus on structuring, planning, answering, and reviewing responses to each section of the exam. So please don't worry if you're wondering as I'm reading this paragraph out how I actually created it, how I arrived at it, how I structured it, all of that stuff. The focus of this example is solely to illustrate what a discussion about stylistic choices could look like. Before we look at this sample body paragraph, let's unpack the question a little bit. Firstly, the paragraph that we're about to analyze will be based on a scene from Thor Ragnarok. Ragnarok was directed by Taika Waititi. The link to the scene that we're analyzing is in the resources tab, so pause this lesson, go and watch that scene, and then come back once you're done. All right, so as we learned earlier, stylistic features refer to the type of language or clothes that are available for you to use. Stylistic choices refers to the language or clothes that you actually choose to use. And then style is just a way to describe the language or clothes that you use. As we know, the question that we're looking at, it requires us to discuss stylistic choices. So this will be the focus of our response, the language or clothes that you actually choose to use, or in this case, the language or clothes that Waititi has chosen to use in Ragnarok, the specific scene that you just watched. In other words, the response must discuss stylistic choices and the effect of those choices in constructing a text within a particular genre. This last part, within a particular genre, is another aspect of the question. This means answering the question will involve analyzing the language clothes that Waititi actually used in the text. And as we've seen throughout this lesson, stylistic choices refers to the selection of stylistic features, and stylistic features refers to aspects of text. If we take it one step further, those aspects of text are language patterns, language features, structure, voice, and narrative point of view. Ultimately, this means that my response should focus on Waititi's use of one or more of those aspects that we just saw, and then the effect of that use on constructing the text, Ragnarok, within a particular genre. That's a bit of an overview of the question. Now let's take a look at this sample body paragraph. Taika Waititi's stylistic choices in Thor Ragnarok are typified by his use of candy-colored visuals and humorous dialogue. In turn, these choices exemplify Waititi's adventurous style and make the film stand out among others within the superhero genre. In one iconic scene from the film, Thor is depicted in a ginormous gladiator arena with hundreds of thousands of spectators. Suspenseful music builds while a worm's eye camera angle conveys smoke bombs exploding into green-colored plumes. The camera subsequently cuts to a close-up of Thor's face, which has red tribal markings painted on it, as he places a teal-blue helmet on his head with unadulterated determination. Suspenseful music reaches a climax as the camera slowly zooms in on a gate in the arena, which Hulk suddenly bursts out of. The music abruptly stops, and the camera cuts to a medium shot of Thor, who ecstatically exclaims, "Yes!" in response. The crowd of spectators immediately gasp in shock at Thor's reaction to his imposing adversary, Hulk, and then Thor giddily shouts, "He's a friend from work." Waititi's use of colour and humour in Thor Ragnarok represents a turning point in the titular character's arc, which was regarded in previous Thor films as overly serious. Titular. In turn, these stylistic choices introduce a welcome note of levity to the superhero genre, particularly the MCU. That's the body paragraph. Now let's highlight some key parts of it. Before we do that, I'd like to note that these comments only focus on how to analyze stylistic choices and don't directly address the second part of this question that we're analyzing, which is the constructing a text within a particular genre part. We're talking about genre in the next lesson, so I'll save our discussion of it for then. Firstly, what stylistic choices did Taika Waititi make? As we're discussing these comments, I'd recommend having the PDF study notes handy so you can connect what is on the slide to what I've written in the body paragraph. Candy-coloured visuals and humorous dialogue. These are stylistic choices because stylistic choices ultimately refers to aspects of text, which include language features, and the relevant language features used in the scene are colour and diction. After stating what the stylistic choices are, you'll want to refer to an example or two. This is just an excerpt of the example that I describe in the body paragraph. Suspenseful music builds while a worm's eye camera angle conveys smoke bombs exploding into green-coloured plumes. After referring to an example, it's important to explain the effects of the stylistic choices. In the context of my response, those effects were that Waititi's use of colour and humour represents a turning point in the titular character's arc, and introduce a welcome note of levity to the superhero genre. By the way, levity just means treating something serious in a humorous way. Finally, you'll want to use an adjective or two to succinctly describe what kind of style is created as a result of the text creator's stylistic choices. Importantly, you don't need to do this part last. You'll notice in my body paragraph that I described Waititi's style in the second sentence of that paragraph, and I described his style quite simply as adventurous. Hopefully you're thinking that the use of the word adventurous, it's nothing too fancy. I've used a very straightforward adjective describing word to describe Waititi's style. And that represents a really important lesson in English ATAR made simple and just doing well in English ATAR generally, which is that I want you to do the simple things well before you try and level up, so to speak. What this means is that I'd prefer for you to just describe something clearly, such as using the word adventurous, before trying to use these big complex words that you might not know the meaning of, because if you don't know the meaning of them, then what you're trying to say gets diluted, it becomes unclear, the markers don't know what you're saying, and then you don't get the marks that you deserve. Focus on nailing the basics, and then you can try and improve from there. That's all the main content from this lesson. Let's discuss a simple summary of it. Our first main section from the lesson was a discussion of the key terms, and the first one that we looked at was style. Style is a way of describing how a text creator uses language. And a little tip, you must use an adjective to describe a text creator's style. See the list of adjectives to describe style in the PDF study notes. The next term we discussed was stylistic features, and we learnt that the definition of that one is the ways in which aspects of text are arranged and how they affect meaning. We pinpointed two main parts of this definition. The first one was aspects of text, and there we discovered that aspects of text refers to narrative point of view, voice, structure, language patterns, language features, which includes diction and syntax. The next main element of this definition is the affect meaning part of it. And that just requires you to answer this question: what is the effect of the use of those aspects of texts? The last main term that we looked at was stylistic choices. And we saw that the definition for that is just simply the selection of stylistic features. Note that stylistic features are the features that are available to use, whereas stylistic choices are the features that are actually used. Our next main section of the lesson was discussing the difference between stylistic features, stylistic choices, and style. Here, we discussed that stylistic features is like the type of language and clothes that are available for you to use. For example, if you want to dress casually, there are certain types of clothes that are available for you to wear. Then for stylistic choices, we defined that one as just the language and clothes that you actually choose to use. For example, if I'm going for a casual style, I might choose to wear Ugg boots, track pants, and a hoodie. Lastly, for style, this is just a way to describe the language and clothes that you've used. And an example, as a result of those stylistic choices of wearing the track pants, the hoodie, the Ugg boots, you can describe that style as casual. Next main section of the lesson was how syllabus points manifest in exam questions. Here, we saw that analytical questions require you to dissect the style of a text creator by analyzing the stylistic choices they've made. On the other hand, creative questions require you to create your own style by using stylistic features. Our last main section of the lesson was about past WACE exam questions, and there was just the one. And we saw that when analyzing a text creator's stylistic choices, you should firstly state what the stylistic choices are. Secondly, describe examples of the stylistic choices using appropriate meta-language where relevant. Meta-language is essentially using the terms that are in the language features Bible in the right way when you're describing textual evidence. There's a lesson that goes into more about meta-language at the beginning of Module 3. After you've described the examples of the stylistic choices, then you should explain the effects of those stylistic choices. And lastly, use an adjective to describe the text creator's style as established through the stylistic choices the text creator has made. That is it for this lesson. Make sure you go and complete the workbook activities. They get you to complete text tables about style, stylistic features, stylistic choices in relation to 2 studied texts. And the process for completing those text tables is the same process that we went through that's on this slide in relation to the Thor Ragnarok scene. All the best with completing that, and I'll see you in the next lesson, which is on genre. I'm sure I don't need to explain how important that one is. Until then, just keep it simple.